Hi, still on the subject of dignity. Um, when, or at least my experience, apart from the usual incidents that happens often when relating to situations of dire needs for the suffering people on the continent of Africa, south of the Sahara. I am often inclined to look elsewhere in the in the in our daily lives. Often one hears of very, very troubling and saddening stories of dark-skinned people from the African continent being mistreated, being looked down upon, being refused the basic rights all across the world. You hear of African students in East Europe and elsewhere being severely maltreated. And some of the most troubling stories one hears of, be it true or not, are the ones coming from especially Eastern Europe. It is very troubling sometimes to me when I read and hear about stories of how majority of the societies in Eastern Europe seems to be sitting in this old archaic perception of the African, of the African. It's always very important for me to sort of stress on this point, because I am very uncomfortable using this term, which I discussed in my earlier segments about this collective generalization. I believe again that it should not be used, just like it would not be used for it would not be used collectively for people coming from South America or Europe or Asia and that kind of thing. Yeah, once in a while it does, but this is the stigma which is stuck, and therefore once in a while one is inclined to use it, but I want to always use it with inverted commas, begin and close. And when one hears of stories of especially Eastern Europeans who seem to be stuck in this perception that the African is primitive and barbaric and without culture and coming from the huts and living in the trees. So very, very, very less respect is given to the Africans. And I know very well that a lot of the people from different African countries who've traveled out there are really struggling. And this is where I mean it should be addressed. But coming back to the dignity of the human being, one of the areas that I'm a sports enthusiast, big time. I'm born in Ghana, and in Ghana, soccer, football is our passion. It's the leading sports or sporting activity out there. We all grew up with it. So I have followed football wherever I go, and it is quite interesting when I hear the comments from commentators. And I have to remember to mention this. And this is also in direct relations to the human dignity. Often I have noticed and realized that whenever there is any report coming out of the continent of Africa in relation to the dark-skinned population, I am yet to see the international media referring to these stories based on expert local information. I know that of late CNN, the American news media, has been doing stuff like that. The BBC has as well. So it helps, but otherwise, often when something happens, for example, in Kenya, and they're talking about it in Germany, they're talking about it in New York, or they're talking about it in Toronto, Canada, or they're talking about it in Moscow. It's very seldom that I've seen them invite someone who originates from this area, or this region, or this country, to add to whatever report they are setting out, to substantiate. I am sometimes very baffled as to why often you see them, the international media, getting in experts or local knowledge individuals from Syria, from Iraq, from Jordan, from Thailand, Philippines, coming in and sort of adding to whatever report is coming out. Not when it happens to the dark-skinned countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. And that is something that I have, thought of very, very, very often. In fact, in certain parts of Europe, and I know that this happens widely, in certain parts of Europe, they would rather call in their so-called so-and-so who is an expert on African relations and situations. Wow. I wonder how, someone who is using theoretical or theory, someone who's using theoretical appliances can be more relied upon than someone who is from that country or that region. But so has it been for many years. And this, of course, adds to the continuous misconception. But this reflects very often in sports, and like I said, I've been, very very active in following the sporting activities around the world involving African countries in track and field, in Olympics, in soccer, in varieties of sporting events. And it surprises me, especially, and as I mentioned in one of the earlier segments, how an established, respected British commentator is commenting on how the Africans are competing vigorously with the Moroccans and the Tunisians, and what he actually meant was the runners or the athletes from Kenya and Ethiopia and those areas in East Africa. They're competing, to win the best places with the Moroccan athletes. How is that possible? But this is a confirmation of ignorance at its best. Instead of the commentator to do his homework and learn about a Kenyan athlete being different from an Ethiopian athlete, being different from a Sudanese athlete, being different from a Tanzanian athlete, being different from a Ugandan athlete, he collectively presents them as African athletes competing strongly against Moroccan athletes. Oh my goodness. And I'm thinking, what's going to be done about this? And I hear that very often also when it comes to other sporting events. Like, for example, one thing I have noticed very, very, very much is when the commentators are commenting on, let's say, soccer matches between an African country and, say, an opponent from Europe or from South America or elsewhere. Sometimes I get very surprised to hear them using the pronoun instead of making a reference to them being who they are. In other words, the noun. I get very surprised when I hear them say, "Oh, and look at them. Look at them. They are this and they are that." Instead of saying maybe the Ghanaians are this and the Ghanaians are that, or the Nigerians are this, or the Cameroonians are this, they would rather use the pronoun. And this is again a reflection of ignorance. But they seem to be comfortable with it, without. I think it is the duty of the journalist or the news media to find out, like I said in my earlier segments, the adjectives of these names, of these people. When you are commenting between Germany and England, you're going to say, and the Germans are so and so and the English are so and so. You're not going to say, and they are against the English, and they, and to come back to my point, all this is a sign of not giving due respect and dignity. As if the Africans, in other words, the dark-skinned population from Sub-Saharan Africa, are aliens or something. It's like they are not part of this universe. And as usual, when you hear about, think about this. When you hear about the world, when the international media talks about the world, in its positive context, you will realize that it's very seldom they include Africa, the continent. I'm sorry to say that